I never thought I'd see my own photograph taped to a church door, especially not with those words, scrawled in thick red marker on my son's wedding day. My name is Martin Valor. I'm 65 years old. For 40 of those years, I've built an empire in cedarwood from the ground up. My construction company, Valor Holdings, reshaped the city's skyline. I did it all with honest work, calloused hands, and one principle: family first. My son Arthur was the sole heir to that principle and to everything I'd built. September 14th, 2024. That date was supposed to be a monument to my life's work. The day I, a widower, handed my only son over to his new life. He was marrying Bianca, a woman he'd met 8 months ago. A financial consultant, she said. From our first handshake, something about her smile felt like polished glass. It was too smooth, too perfect. But Arthur was smitten, and his happiness had always been the blueprint for my own. I woke before the dawn, just as I had every workday for 4 decades. I put on the new navy blue suit, the one I'd saved for this. I shaved twice, meticulous, trying to calm the tremor in my hand. I wasn't just nervous, I was proud. I arrived at St. Matthew's Cathedral at 5:30 p.m., right as the evening sun cast the stained glass in shades of gold and blood. Guests milled on the steps, their quiet conversations stopping as I approached. "Martin, good to see you," one said, his eyes darting away too quickly. "Looking sharp, Mr. Valor," said another, clutching his wife's arm and steering her inside. I felt a chill despite the warm September air. They were avoiding my gaze. I dismissed it. Nerves. Everyone's on edge at a wedding. I walked up the wide stone steps, my hand outstretched to push open the massive oak doors. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper. Annoyed, I looked closer. It was a cheap copy paper, taped crudely to the ancient wood. On it was my face. A photo taken from my company's website, grainy and oversized, and underneath it, in that screaming red ink, were the words that stopped my heart. Presents not permitted. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I stood paralyzed. The world narrowed to that sheet of paper. Presents not permitted. It was a typo. It had to be. It must have meant presents. A group of guests walked up behind me. "Oh my," a woman whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Is that Martin Valor?" a man murmured. They didn't walk around me. They parted, giving me a wide berth as if I were diseased, their faces a mix of pity and second-hand embarrassment. I could feel the heat rising in my collar, a flush of shame so hot it felt like a sunburn, my own photograph, barring me from my son's wedding. I tore the paper from the door. My hand was shaking so violently the page rattled. "Sir? Mr. Valor? Are you quite all right?" an usher asked, stepping out. I couldn't speak. I just held up the paper. His eyes widened. I don't know anything about this, sir. Let me get someone." He hurried back inside, but the door didn't close fully. Through the crack, I saw him. Arthur, my son. He was standing near the altar, adjusting his bow tie. He looked up as the usher rushed to him, saw me in the doorway, and froze. Our eyes met across the sanctuary. I waited for the flash of confusion, the anger, the look that said, "Father, what's happening? Who did this?" I expected him to run to me, to rip the paper from my hand and charge outside to find the culprit. He did none of those things. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw no surprise. I saw no anger. I saw a dull, horrifying guilt. He knew. He knew this was here. He held my gaze for a solid second, then did the unforgivable. He looked away. He turned his back to me and said something to his best man. The world collapsed. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. The paper crumpled in my fist. The sound was loud in the sudden silence of the courtyard. The guests watched me, waiting for me to scream, to cry, to make a scene. I would give them nothing. I smoothed the front of my suit. I adjusted my cuffs. Without a word, I turned around. Each step down the stone stairs felt like it was cracking the marble. My feet were lead. My best suit felt like a clown's costume. "Martin?" I heard a voice call out, someone I'd known for 20 years. I didn't turn. I kept walking. I heard the murmurs swell behind me, a wave of whispers that felt like a physical blow to my back. I just wanted to get away. Away from the public humiliation. Away from the son who had just condemned me. Away from the most profound and painful betrayal of my 65 years. I got into my car. The leather seats, still warm from the sun, felt alien. I sat there for a full minute, the crumpled paper still clenched in my hand. I didn't start the engine. I just stared at the reflection of the church in my rearview mirror. I drove home, the streets of Cedarwood passing by in a blur. The city I had helped build suddenly felt like a foreign country. I unlocked my front door. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My wife Eleanor had been gone for 3 years, but her presence had always lingered in the scent of lemon oil and old books. Tonight, the house just felt empty, hollowed out. I walked to my usual armchair, the brown leather one, and sat down. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't pour myself a drink. I just sat in the dusk as the shadows grew long and consumed the room. I sat there, staring at the wall, the crumpled ball of paper still in my hand. An hour later, my phone began to ring. It blared from the hall table, a sharp, violent intrusion into the tomb-like silence. I flinched. My first thought, Arthur. He's calling to apologize. It was all Bianca's idea, a terrible, cruel mistake. He's calling to beg me to come back. I stared at the phone. It rang and rang and rang, then stopped. A minute later, it started again and again. I didn't move. I couldn't. I didn't have the strength to hear his excuses. I didn't have the strength to hear his voice, now the voice of a stranger. For the next 3 hours, the phone was relentless. Call after call. A constant, screaming reminder of what had happened. Each ring felt like a fresh cut. Around 10 p.m., the ringing finally stopped. The silence that fell was heavier, more oppressive than before. I finally summoned the will to move. My limbs felt stiff, old. I walked to the table and picked up the phone. The screen glowed, illuminating my face in the dark. 47 missed calls. My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the log. My cousin from Augusta, my oldest friend David, my sister-in-law Samantha, members of the board at Valor Holdings, old family friends. They had all been at the church. They had all seen the photograph. They had all seen me turned away. They had all called to ask, "Martin, what happened? Are you okay? What did you do?" They all knew. My entire world knew about my humiliation. I understood then. This wasn't just an insult. This was a public execution. This was the first step in something much larger, something more sinister than I could possibly imagine. I didn't sleep. At 4 a.m., I was pacing my study, the crumpled paper now sitting on my desk like a piece of evidence. I replayed every conversation, every dinner, every strange moment of the last 8 months. Bianca. It all started with Bianca. I remembered the night Arthur introduced her. It was here, in this very house. She was elegant, dressed in a sharp blazer, her voice smooth and confident. "Mr. Valor, it's a true honor," she'd said, her handshake firm. "Arthur has told me so much about your business acumen." She'd called herself a financial consultant, specializing in family investments. "I'd love to know more about your properties," she'd said over dinner, her gaze sharp and appraising. "How do you manage such a diverse portfolio?" I'd been proud. Like a fool, I'd boasted about my properties downtown, the condos on the waterfront, the land I'd secured near the new highway. Arthur had beamed, adding details. "Dad owns 3 buildings on Kensington Street alone," he'd said. Bianca had nodded, taking a delicate sip of wine. "Impressive. And your accounts? Are they consolidated? Do you have debts?" "No debts," I'd said firmly. Never believed in it. Innocent questions, I'd thought. A future daughter-in-law showing interest. Now I saw it for what it was, an interrogation. A quiet, smiling audit of my life's work. A specific memory surfaced, sharp and acidic. It was July. I was in my office organizing tax documents when I realized a folder was gone. The deeds to the Kensington Street properties. I'd searched the house for hours, my frustration mounting. I finally asked Arthur, "Arthur, have you seen the blue folder for the Kensington properties?" He'd looked up from his phone, his expression strange, almost startled. "No, Dad." "Why? You keep those in the safe, right?" "I had them out," I'd said. "I was reviewing them." "Well, they'll turn up," he'd replied, his tone dismissive. "Stop worrying about paperwork all the time. Bianca says you need to relax more." His answer had bothered me. It was evasive, but he was my son. I let it go. Fatal. Mistake. Then, in August, the suggestions began. "Dad, you really should let someone help you with your finances," Arthur would say. "Bianca knows some incredible people at her firm. They could help you optimize everything." "I've been optimizing everything for 40 years, son," I'd replied curtly. "I don't need help from strangers." Arthur had sulked. After that, the secret meetings started. I'd hear them whispering in the kitchen, the sound stopping abruptly the moment I entered the room. Arthur, who had always told me everything, became distant, cold, and irritable. "Don't worry about it, Dad," he'd snap, a phrase he'd never used with me before. My gaze fell on a stack of papers on the corner of my desk. The wedding documents Arthur had brought over last week, September 7th. "Just some routine venue forms, Dad," he'd said, sliding them across the table. "They need the father of the groom's signature here and here." He'd been so casual. I was so excited, so full of trust. I signed without reading. I, Martin Valor, who had never signed a contract without reading every line of fine print, had blindly signed my son's papers. My hands trembled as I reached for the copies I'd made. I spread them out under the green desk lamp. The light illuminated the header. It wasn't a venue form. It was a loan application. Citadel Bank. My name, my signature, my social security number, my financial details. There were 3 of them. The largest, a business loan application, was for $50,000, and it was dated for yesterday, the day of the wedding. I fell back into my chair. The air left my lungs. He had used my trust. He had used my love. He had used my excitement for his own wedding to make me sign my own financial ruin. He hadn't just barred me from the wedding. He had robbed me first. My fingers fumbled on the keyboard. I typed in my credentials for Citadel Bank online. My heart was a cold hammer against my ribs. I clicked on my business account. The balance was wrong. I scrolled down. Transaction date, September 14th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. Type, wire transfer out. Amount, $50,000. I looked at the clock. 5:15 a.m. I had arrived at the church at 5:30 p.m., 33 minutes. 33 minutes before I arrived, beaming with pride, they were draining my account. While I was carefully shaving, while I was fixing my tie, my son was robbing me. The room began to spin. I grabbed the desk to steady myself. At that exact moment, my landline phone rang. The sound made me jump, a raw scream in the quiet study. I looked at the caller ID, unknown number. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver. My nightmare was real. It was happening. I picked it up. "Hello?" My voice was a dry croak. "Mr. Martin Valor?" A professional female voice asked. "Yes, this is he." "Mr. Valor, this is Claire Hopkins from Citadel Bank's fraud department. I apologize for the early call, but we have a highly irregular situation regarding your accounts. We need you to come to the main branch on Broad Street as soon as it opens. Can you be here at 9 a.m.? My nightmare had just begun. At 9 a.m. on the dot, I walked into the main branch of Citadel Bank. The plush carpets and quiet efficiency of the place, usually a comfort, now felt like a sterile, hostile environment. Claire Hopkins was a woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and a look of genuine concern. She led me into a glass-walled office. "Mr. Valor, thank you for coming in," she said, closing the door and opening a thick folder. "We need to talk about some very irregular movements." She laid out the papers I had signed. "We processed this $50,000 loan application yesterday. The funds were transferred to a new account, which was then immediately emptied. The transfer was flagged by our system, but the signature, it's a perfect match." "It's my signature," I said, my voice flat. "My son. He told me they were wedding papers." Claire Hopkins's professional mask slipped for a second, replaced by shock. "I see." She pushed 3 more documents across the desk. "That brings us to these. These 3 applications came in after the first one was approved. All yesterday afternoon. One for $35,000, one for $28,000, and a line of credit for $75,000. My stomach turned to ice. "The good news," she continued, "is that our security system automatically blocked these. The rapid, high-volume requests from a new IP address triggered a red flag. We need to know, Mr. Valor, did you authorize these movements?" "No, I never saw them. I authorized nothing." She took a deep, steadying breath. "Mr. Valor, this constitutes serious, premeditated fraud. We need to file a formal police report immediately. And for your protection, I am recommending we freeze all your accounts, personal and business, until we can secure them." "Do it," I said. I walked out of the bank into the bright morning sunlight, a man relieved to have averted total disaster, and a man terrified to have just confirmed his own son was trying to ruin him. Chatrouom. I returned home with a mixture of terror and a new, cold fury. I went straight to my study. If they had faked loan applications, what else had they done? I didn't just search my desk. I tore it apart. I emptied every drawer. I went through old tax files, correspondence, blueprints. At the very bottom of my deep filing cabinet, tucked beneath a box of Eleanor's old letters, was a folder I didn't recognize. A plain manila folder with no label. I opened it. My blood stopped. It was full of photocopies, copies of all my most important documents, the deed to my house, the deeds to the Kensington properties, the ones I thought were lost, my insurance policies, my will, certificates of deposit. The paper was different. The print quality was from a cheap copier. Someone had systematically stolen and copied my entire financial life. On the last page, I found something that made me physically ill. It was a handwritten document. I knew the handwriting. I'd taught him how to write it. It was Arthur's. It was a detailed list of all my assets, with estimated values jotted next to each one. House, Cedarwood, 1.2 meters. Kensington Properties, 850 K. Stocks, Valor Holdings, 2.5 mena. Bank accounts, approx. 300 K. At the bottom of the page, a final note was scrawled. Total est. Net worth, 495 mena. Plan B. After draining accounts, file for declaration of mental incapacity. Use public episodes, wedding, and documented confusion as proof. Plan B. Declaration of mental incapacity. My son. My son hadn't just planned to steal from me. He had planned to erase me, to have me declared mentally incompetent, locked away, while he and that woman took control of everything I had ever built. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Bianca's constant, "Oh, Martin, you forgot again?" Arthur's concerned, "Dad, you seem so stressed. Maybe you should see someone." They weren't concerns. They were groundwork. They were building a case against my sanity. In the folder, I found something else. A small stack of photographs, printed on the same cheap paper. Photos of me, taken without my knowledge. Me, asleep in my armchair. Me, confused, looking for my keys. Me, having breakfast in my pajamas. They had been documenting me. Then, the final, cruelest photo. Me, at Eleanor's grave on her anniversary, weeping. Bianca had been there. She had put her arm around me, comforting me. She had been photographing my grief to use as a weapon. I was shaking, but not from fear. It was rage. A pure, cold rage I hadn't felt in my life. I grabbed my phone and took pictures of the handwritten note. The Plan B. The list of assets. I photographed the secret pictures they had taken of me. I called Richard Newman, my lawyer for 30 years. "Richard, I need you. Now." "Martin, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "It's Arthur and Bianca. They tried to rob me, Richard. And I have the proof. I have a folder. It's a plan. A plan to declare me incompetent." There was a stunned silence on the line. "Meet me at my office first thing tomorrow, 8 a.m. Do not let that folder out of your sight. Lock it up. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "I'll be there." I hung up and looked at the folder. It was pure evil in my son's handwriting. I put it back in the deep drawer of my desk and locked it. I tested the lock. Solid. I needed air. I needed to get out of this house, this tomb they had been building for me. I felt suffocated. I grabbed my keys. I'd go for a drive, get some food, anything to clear my head before tomorrow's battle. I was gone for less than an hour. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. I bought a coffee I didn't drink. When I returned, I knew something was wrong the instant I walked in. The air was different, stale. I ran to my study. The door was fine, but the desk, the lock on the deep filing drawer was shattered. Splintered wood hung from the hole. I yanked the drawer open. It was empty. The folder, the deeds, the photos, the handwritten Plan B, all of it, gone. "No, no, no, no!" I yelled, sweeping the items off my desk. A lamp crashed to the floor. He had a key. Arthur still had a key to the house. He must have come back. He knew. He knew I'd find it. My proof. My one solid piece of evidence was gone. I had the photos on my phone, but the original, the physical proof in his own handwriting, was vanished. They would just say I faked it. I was standing in a ransacked office, disheveled, yelling, just like a confused, unstable old man, just like they'd planned. Despair. It was a cold, physical weight. I had the truth, but I had no proof. I called Richard back. He took it. Richard, he broke in and stole the folder. He stole the proof. Richard cursed, a rare event. Okay, Martin, calm down. This just got much, much worse. This is a criminal matter now, not just civil. You need more than a lawyer. You need an investigator. Who? Jack Monroe, ex-Cedarwood PD. He's the best. He's expensive and he's abrasive, but he finds things people don't want found. I'll call him. Be at his office in 1 hour. Jack Monroe's office was on the 3rd floor of a nondescript building over a dry cleaner. The air smelled of starch and coffee. The office was just a desk, 2 chairs, and a filing cabinet. Monroe looked like he'd been poured into his suit and left to set. He was 45, with a penetrating gaze that made me feel like he was already X-raying my life. Richard called, he said, not offering a handshake. He says your kid robbed you and you let him steal the proof. He broke in, I snapped. With his own key, Monroe corrected me. Not breaking and entering, just entering, sit, talk. I explained everything, the wedding, the photo, the bank, the loan applications, the hidden folder, the Plan B, the stolen evidence. I showed him the photos on my phone. He looked at them without expression. Photos are fine, not as good as the original, but they establish a motive. So your kid is a thief, but you said his fiancée, Bianca, is a financial consultant? That's what she claims. 8 months, Monroe mused. That's a fast engagement for a guy with a multi-million-dollar inheritance. I'll start with her. She's the variable. You're the mark. Your son is the inside man. She's the professional. Can you find anything? I asked, the desperation naked in my voice. I can find everything, Mr. Valor, Jack said, leaning back. The question is, are you prepared for what I find? Because in my experience, when you dig this deep, you never, ever like the prize. Find it, I said. Find it all. 3 days. That's how long it took. Monroe called me. My office, now. I was there in 10 minutes. He had a new folder on his desk. A thin one. Bianca, he said, opening it. Doesn't exist. Not really. He slid a driver's license photo across the desk. It was her, but the name was different. Her name is Marissa Stalder. Criminal record in Augusta and Columbia. 3 convictions for fraud, document forgery, and embezzlement. She specializes in what we call inheritance seduction scams. Finds a weak link in a wealthy family, seduces them, and helps them liberate the family's assets. He showed me surveillance photos he'd taken. Marissa, meeting an older man in a coffee shop, reviewing documents. Marissa, counting a thick wad of cash in her car. She has an apartment in North Cedarwood you didn't know about, Jack said. So Arthur is just a victim. A fool, but a victim. I felt a strange, desperate surge of hope. Jack's face remained impassive. Don't get ahead of yourself, but there's a complication. A new player. I've been running surveillance on your house, too. He slid another photo across the desk. A woman, in her late 50s, standing across the street from my house, partially hidden by a tree. She was holding a phone, pointing it at my front door. Who is that? Took me a day to ID her, Jack said. That is Margaret Stalder, Marissa's mother. She flew into Cedarwood 2 days ago, and she's been watching you. She followed you to the grocery store yesterday. My blood ran cold. The mother? She's in on it? She's not just in on it, Mr. Valor. A setup this complex? A predator like Marissa? The mother is almost always the mastermind, the Fagin to her artful dodger. She's here to make sure the job gets finished. She's the real threat. I was no longer just fighting my son. I was fighting an organized, professional criminal family, and they were watching me. "The folder is gone, Martin," Jack said, leaning forward. "That's a problem. His word against yours. The photos on your phone help, but they can be contested. We need something concrete. Something they can't deny." "How?" "Your son isn't just a thief. He's sloppy. He uses a cloud-based messaging app that automatically saves call logs and audio. A forensic IT specialist I use just pulled a warrant and accessed his account. Legally." He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. "You need to hear this. Call log from September 12th, 2 days before the wedding." He pressed play. My son's voice filled the small office. But it was an Arthur I didn't recognize. Cold, calculating. Arthur's voice. "My biggest concern is that he'll suspect something ahead of time. He's been asking questions about the caterer bills." Bianca's voice. "He's just an old man, Arthur. He's stressed." Arthur's voice. "No. That's why I think the plan for the door is better. We prohibit him from entering. We humiliate him publicly. It kills 2 birds with 1 stone. It's the final break, and it creates the evidence that he's mentally unstable. He's going to react badly. It's the perfect setup for Plan B." Jack paused the recording. I couldn't breathe. I was trembling, not from fear. It was the same cold rage from my study, but now it was solid. It was pure ice. "He called it Plan B," I whispered. "He did," Jack said. "The humiliation. The photo. It was his idea, not hers." "It was his," Jack confirmed, his voice void of emotion. He hadn't been duped. He hadn't been tricked. He was a willing, active participant. He was the one who planned my public disgrace to build a case against my sanity. "There's more," Jack said grimly. This one is from March, a week after he supposedly met her." He pressed play again. It was Arthur, on the phone with an unknown man. Arthur's voice. "I found a way. I've been looking at those inheritance sites you mentioned. I think my father is a perfect target. He trusts me. Completely. He's sentimental about my mother. It's a huge weakness." Man's voice. "We can work with that. We have the perfect consultant for this. Her name is Marissa. She'll be in touch." I closed my eyes. The office was silent save for the hum of the air conditioner. I had been clinging to the idea that my son was a victim, a fool who fell for a predator. But the recording was undeniable. He hadn't been seduced. He hadn't been targeted. He was the architect. He had sought them out. He had put a target on his own father's back. He had identified my love for him, my grief for his dead mother, as weaknesses to be exploited. "Mr. Valor?" Jack asked. I opened my eyes. The grief was gone. The confusion was gone. "My son is dead," I said. "He died 3 years ago with my wife. The thing that is walking around with his face is just a monster." I stood up. "What's the next move?" I walked straight from Jack Monroe's office to Richard Newman's. Jack came with me, carrying a small, encrypted hard drive. Richard, my oldest friend, sat behind his massive mahogany desk and listened to the audio recordings. He didn't flinch, but the color drained from his face. When the second recording finished, the one where Arthur called me a target, Richard slowly removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He was silent for a full minute. "This is criminal," he finally said, his voice a low growl. "This isn't a family dispute, Martin. This is criminal conspiracy to defraud, forgery, attempted aggravated fraud, psychological torture." "What do we do, Richard?" I asked. Richard put his glasses back on, and he was no longer my friend. He was my lawyer. We do three things simultaneously. First, Jack will take this hard drive and a full affidavit from you to the Cedarwood PD. We file a formal criminal complaint. We get a warrant. Second, he continued, we file civil actions to recover the $50,000. We'll get a lien on any account Bianca or Marissa Stalder holds, and we'll get a judgment against Arthur. And third, he said, his expression hardening, we protect you. We fight Plan B before it ever happens. We are going to request a full, independent psychological and cognitive evaluation. We're going to get a court-certified document stating you are of sound mind and body. We are changing your will. We are changing your power of attorney. As of this moment, Arthur has no legal connection to you or Valor Holdings. We are cutting him off. Completely. He looked at me. This is the point of no return, Martin. You're about to send your only son to prison. He's not my son, I said. He's the man who tried to destroy me. Burn him to the ground. Before you file that report, there's one more thing, Jack said, turning to me. That old woman, Margaret, she's been watching you. They stole your folder. They know you're suspicious. That means they're not done. What do you mean? They've been documenting your confusion. They've been building a case. I guarantee you they didn't just use a camera at your wife's grave. That night, Jack Monroe came to my house. He wasn't the abrasive PI. He was the ex-cop, all business, carrying a black case. They've been inside, he said, walking through my living room with a small detector. Probably when Arthur stole the folder, or even before. The detector beeped. It was quiet, but insistent. Jack knelt by my bookshelf. He moved a framed photo of Eleanor and me. Tucked behind it, so small I never would have seen it, was a tiny black camera lens. Living room, he said, pulling it out and dropping it in an evidence bag. He found another one in the kitchen, taped to the underside of a cabinet, pointed right at my breakfast table. He swept my study. The detector went off again, this time under my desk. He taped a small device. Spy microphone. They've been recording your phone calls. They probably heard you call Richard. My stomach clenched. They know we're coming. They know something, Jack said. He went into my bedroom, then the bathroom. He opened my medicine cabinet. What are these? My blood pressure pills. I take them every morning. Jack looked at the bottle. He popped the cap and poured a few into his hand. These aren't right. He pulled a pill identifier app on his phone. These are your pills, he said, holding one up. And these are not. They're a mild sedative. Same shape, slightly different color. Designed to cause drowsiness, mental confusion, dizziness. I remembered the last 2 weeks. How I'd felt foggy in the mornings. How I'd blamed it on stress. They had been drugging me, systematically, to create the very symptoms they needed to prove their case. They've created a complete psychological profile, Martin, Jack said, his voice grim. They know what you eat, when you sleep, what you say, and they've been poisoning you to make Plan B a reality. As if on cue, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Arthur. I looked at Jack. He nodded. Put it on speaker, I answered. Hello? Dad? Oh, thank God, I've been so worried. The voice. It was dripping with false, sticky concern. It was the voice of the son I used to know. A perfect imitation. It made my skin crawl. Dad, we need to talk. Bianca and I are so worried about you. The wedding guests. They all said you acted very strangely on Saturday. You just left. Acted strangely. The phrase from the recording. They were starting. I was just upset, Arthur. I made my voice sound weak, confused. I know, Dad, I know. And Bianca feels terrible about that misunderstanding with the photo. She wants to apologize in person. We were hoping we could come over tomorrow morning, just to talk. Make sure you're okay. Misunderstanding. That's what they were calling it. They weren't just coming to apologize. They were coming to stage the next episode, to check on their victim, maybe to plant more pills. Yes, I said. Yes, son. Tomorrow would be good. Great, Dad. We'll be there at 10. We love you. He hung up. I looked at Jack. They're coming tomorrow. It's already set up, Jack replied, his eyes cold and hard. He tapped the bagged cameras in his hand. They want to build a case? Let's give them one. We'll wire this whole place, every word, every move. This is going to be hard, Martin, he warned. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to make you feel guilty. They're going to use your love for your wife against you. Can you handle it? I looked at the picture of Eleanor that Jack had moved, the woman I had loved for 35 years, the legacy they were trying to incinerate. I'm ready, I said. It's time for Arthur and Bianca to find out who Martin Valor really is. The morning of September 21st. Jack arrived at 8 a.m. He didn't just bring back the cameras, he brought his own. Tiny, high definition, and hidden in plain sight. One in a clock on the mantle. One in a smoke detector. Directional microphones disguised as power adapters. The police are on standby 2 blocks away, Jack said, monitoring the feeds from a laptop in the kitchen. The second they incriminate themselves, I give the signal. You just have to play the part. Confused, old, scared. I understand, I said, my heart hammering. At 10 a.m. on the dot, the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath. I walked slowly to the door, shuffling my feet just slightly. I opened it. Arthur entered first. He rushed to me, pulling me into a hug. Dad, you look exhausted. His hug was repulsive. It felt like a snake coiling around me. I patted his back weakly. Bianca followed, her face a perfect mask of rehearsed concern. She was elegantly dressed, holding a bouquet of funereal-looking lilies. Martin, she said, her voice breathy. Thank you for seeing us. We've been sick with worry. Sit down, I told them, gesturing to the sofa directly in view of the camera. Coffee? Don't trouble yourself, Martin, Bianca interrupted, sitting and leaning forward, her hands clasped. We know you've been stressed. Arthur told me you've been having some episodes. Episodes. The key word. Episodes? I asked, playing the part. What kind of episodes? Arthur and Bianca exchanged a meaningful, rehearsed glance. Dad, on Saturday, at the church, Arthur said, his voice soft and condescending. You acted very strangely. You saw that paper and you just left. You didn't answer our calls. Everyone was so worried about you. I don't remember it clearly, I lied. What was on the paper? Bianca leaned forward again. Martin, it was a terrible, cruel prank. Some of Arthur's young groomsmen. They thought it would be funny. We had it taken down immediately. We never authorized it. You reacted very disproportionately. A perfect lie, crafted to make me doubt my own memory, my own reaction. But I saw you, Arthur, I insisted, letting a tremor enter my voice. I saw you through the door. You looked right at me. Dad, I think you misinterpreted my expression, my son replied, his patience practiced. I was just as shocked as you. I was horrified. The lie was so smooth, so easy. He was a natural. That's why we're here, Martin, Bianca said, taking my hand. Her skin was cold. We've decided we think you need professional help. There it was, the true purpose of their visit. What kind of help? Bianca reached into her expensive leather bag and pulled out a glossy, tri-fold brochure. She handed it to me. The cover read, "The Willows, a premier residence for senior care." It showed smiling, gray-haired people playing chess. "We know a wonderful clinic," Bianca said, her voice like syrup. "It's private, specializes in older adults who are experiencing confusion, memory loss. Dr. Campbell is the best in his field." I pretended to read the brochure. I was processing the sheer, ice-cold cynicism. They were so confident in their plan, so sure of my weakness, that they had brought the marketing materials for the very institution they planned to lock me in. "And," Arthur continued, "we've been thinking it would be convenient for someone else to manage your finances. Just temporarily. Just until you're feeling better." "Bianca has so much experience in wealth management," he added, as if it were a brilliant idea. "And as family, we know what's best for you." As family. After barring me from the wedding, after robbing me, after drugging me, they dared to use the word family. That's an interesting proposal," I murmured, looking at the brochure. "But before I make any decisions, I'd like to understand my finances, my current situation. Could you help me review my bank accounts? It's also confusing." Another exchange of glances. This one was fast, nervous. They hadn't expected this. Of course, Dad," Arthur said, a slight stammer in his voice. "Whatever you need. What do you need to know specifically?" "Well," I said, rubbing my temples, "I got a call from the bank, Citadel. They said I was overdrawn. I don't understand how. But then I looked, and there was a loan. A big one. $50,000. The color drained from Bianca's face. Arthur cleared his throat. "Oh, yes, that loan," Arthur said, forcing a casual laugh. "Don't you remember, Dad?" "Remember what?" "You asked me to help you with it last week. You said you were confused by all the small print on the bank's website. You asked me to fill it out for you." The audacity, it was breathtaking. "I did?" I asked. "But what did I need $50,000 for?" For future medical expenses," Bianca improvised, jumping in. "You said you wanted to have liquid cash available for any health emergency, like the one we're worried about now." Their lies were becoming more elaborate, more desperate. "How strange," I murmured. "Because I have a comprehensive medical insurance policy. From Valor Holdings. It covers everything. I wouldn't need cash." A heavy, awkward silence filled the room. Arthur's smile was frozen on his face. Finally, he changed tactics. He dropped the smile and adopted a look of frustrated, paternal concern, the one he'd been practicing. "Dad, this right here," he said, pointing at me. "This is exactly what we're talking about. You have serious memory lapses, contradictions. You don't remember asking for the loan. It's not your fault. It's just part of the natural aging process. But you need professional help." "You're right," I said, nodding slowly. I stood up, shuffling over to my desk. "You're absolutely right." They both smiled, a small, triumphant smile. They thought they had won. "In fact," I said, "I think we should organize all my papers, so you can help me better." I opened the main desk drawer, the one they hadn't broken, and I took out the hard drive Jack had given me. I held up the small black drive. "What's that, Dad?" Arthur asked, his smile faltering. "This is my financial help," I said. "It's a recording. From your phone, Arthur. The one where you call me a target. The one where you plan my public humiliation to prove I'm mentally unstable." Their faces turned to stone. Bianca stood up abruptly. "Martin, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but I think we should leave. You're clearly not well." "Oh, but we're just getting started," I replied, my voice no longer weak. It was cold, hard. "We haven't even talked about the sedatives you've been putting in my medication, or the hidden cameras." Arthur went completely pale. "Dad, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain, son," I said. "I understand perfectly." I was about to nod to the kitchen to give Jack the signal, but at that exact second the doorbell rang, loudly, persistently. We all froze. Jack wasn't supposed to come to the door. I looked at Arthur and Bianca. They were as confused as I was. The ringing wouldn't stop. I walked to the door and opened it. A woman stood on my porch. Late 50s, dressed in a severe suit, her face etched with exhaustion and a deep, simmering anger. It was the woman from Jack's photo. Bianca, Marissa, gasped from behind me. "Mother, what are you doing here?" Margaret Stalder's eyes were fixed on me. She ignored her daughter completely. "Mr. Valor," she said, her voice rough. "I won't let her do it again. I won't let her destroy another family. My daughter, Marissa, she's a predator, a monster I created. She wasn't a mastermind. She was a witness." She pushed a small cardboard box into my hands. "I came to Cedarwood to stop her. I've been recording her. These are the training tapes from her apartment. This is how she turns them. This is how she turned your son." Marissa let out a sound, a half scream, half sob. You betrayed me." "You betrayed yourself, Marissa," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "Years ago." That was Jack Monroe's cue. The kitchen door flew open. Jack stepped out, his phone to his ear. "We're green. Move in." What is this?" Arthur stammered, backing away. "This is the end of the game," I said. The front door, still open, filled with two uniformed Cedarwood police officers. "Arthur Valor and Marissa Stalder," one of the officers announced, his voice booming in the living room. "You are under arrest for the crimes of fraud, document forgery, and criminal conspiracy to defraud." Marissa's mask of sophistication shattered. She became a cornered animal, her eyes wild. "You have no proof. He's a senile old man. He's confused." "We have the bank records, Miss Stalder," Jack said calmly. "We have the audio of the conspiracy from Mr. Valor's cloud account. And thanks to your mother, we have tapes of you coaching him on how to commit psychological abuse. I think we're covered." The terror in my son's eyes was absolute. As the officer pulled his hands behind his back, the cold manipulator from the recordings vanished. He reverted to the scared child he'd been 30 years ago. "Dad!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Dad, please, don't let them do this. We can fix it. We can give the money back. Please, Dad!" They cuffed him. He was sobbing, undone. I walked over to him. Standing so close, I could see the tears streaming down his face. I looked him directly in the eye. "You said it was better to act fast, son, before I suspected anything." He stared at me, his mouth open in disbelief. "You were right," I said. "I also decided to act fast." I watched them lead my son and the monster he'd partnered with out of my house in handcuffs. After Arthur and Marissa were led away, my house fell into a deathly silence. Margaret Stalder, the unexpected ally, sat at my kitchen table, giving a quiet, tearful statement to a detective. Jack stayed with me, professional and focused. You did the right thing, Martin. With the tapes from the mother, this case is irrefutable. Over the next few days, the full scope of their operation was unveiled. The police executed a search warrant on Marissa's North Cedarwood apartment. Richard called me after he got the initial report. Martin, it's worse than we thought. They didn't just find a nice apartment. They found a criminal archive. He described a room with filing cabinets, all organized alphabetically by target. There were folders on 12 other men, Martin, all over 60, all widowers, all with significant assets. Your folder was the thickest. It had your schedules, your psychological profile, even notes on your grief for Eleanor. They had turned my life into a scientific study for the sole purpose of its destruction. And they found the contract, Richard said, his voice heavy with disgust. What contract? A signed agreement between Arthur and Bianca, dated March 15, 2024. It specified the division of your assets, post-acquisition. Arthur was to receive 60% of your total net worth. Marissa would get 40%. They hadn't just planned my ruin. They had put a price on it, signed it, and filed it away. The story exploded. The Cedarwood Press got wind of a prominent businessman being defrauded by his own son. The story of the wedding day betrayal was picked up by state, then national news. The charges were formally filed: continuous fraud, forgery of public documents, criminal conspiracy, aggravated fraud, and even elder abuse for the drugging. The DA is not playing, Martin, Richard informed me. They're looking at 15 years for Marissa, given her priors, and at least 10 for Arthur as the principal accomplice. But the news coverage did something else. It brought others out of the woodwork. The first call was from a woman named Elizabeth Walters in Augusta. Mr. Valor, I saw your story. My son, he and a woman who looked just like that. They stole $95,000 from me last year. Then another call, and another. Within 2 weeks, Richard's office had been contacted by 14 other victims, all from different cities, all with similar stories. It wasn't just Marissa, it was a network. The case expanded from a family betrayal to a multi-state criminal investigation. A few days after the arrests, as I was trying to process the media storm, I had an unexpected visitor. It was my sister-in-law, Samantha, Eleanor's sister. We hadn't spoken much since the funeral 3 years ago, lost in our own separate grief. She stood on my doorstep, her eyes red. "Martin," she said, her voice thick. She didn't say anything else. She just pulled me into a hug. It was the first real, genuine hug I'd had in months. I realized in that moment how starved I was for human contact that didn't want something from me. "We heard what happened," she said, pulling back. "We saw it on the news. I can't believe Arthur would do that. Eleanor would be heartbroken." "I know," I whispered. "You are not alone in this, Martin," she said firmly. "You are family. You're coming to our house for dinner tonight." I'm not taking no for an answer. That night, for the first time in weeks, I sat at a table surrounded by people who loved me without agenda. I vented all the accumulated pain and anguish. Samantha's husband, David, listened patiently. "I just don't understand how I missed it, David," I confessed. "How can a father be so blind?" David, a man of quiet wisdom, put his hand on my shoulder. "Paternal love isn't a weakness, Martin. It's a vulnerability, and criminals know how to exploit it. You are not to blame for trusting your son. He is to blame for betraying that trust." Margaret Stalder had given her box of tapes to the police as formal evidence. Richard had copies made for me. For days, I couldn't bring myself to listen to them. Finally, one night, I sat in my study, now cleaned of all their devices, and pressed play on the first tape. It was dated June 12th. I heard Arthur's voice. He was crying. Arthur's voice. I can't do this to him, Marissa. I can't. He trusts me. He's my father. He's all I have left. Bianca's voice. Cold, clinical. Your father is an obstacle, Arthur. He's not family. He's a bank account, and he's standing between us and our future. If you really love me, you have to choose. I listened, tape after tape, as my son's morality was systematically dismantled. I heard Bianca, Marissa, use sophisticated psychological techniques, emotional blackmail, social isolation. Bianca's voice, tape 8. Your father doesn't love you, Arthur. He controls you. He keeps you dependent on him, on his money, on his approval, so you'll never be free. Freeing yourself from him isn't a crime. It's an act of self-preservation. By the final tape, dated September 10th, just before the wedding, the transformation was complete. Arthur's voice was no longer his own. It was cold, hard, and full of her narrative. Arthur's voice. You're right. He's always been manipulative, always holding his success over my head. It's time he learned what it feels like to have no power. It's time he paid for it. I wept that night. I cried more than I had since Eleanor died, not just for the betrayal, but for the son I had lost, for the man he had been before she found the cracks in his soul and hammered them wide open. A month after the arrests, I did something I never thought I would do. I drove to the Cedarwood County Detention Center. Richard had arranged the visit. I walked through the security checkpoints, the smell of disinfectant and despair hanging in the air. I sat on a plastic chair in a room full of glass partitions. When they brought Arthur in, I barely recognized him. He was thin, gaunt. His hair was matted, and he wore a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that hung off his frame. The calculating predator was gone. He just looked like a broken, hollowed-out man. We looked at each other through the glass. He picked up the phone on his side. I picked up mine. "Dad," he said, his voice a hoarse croak. I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't either," I said, "but I had to see you. I listened to the tapes, Arthur." His face crumpled. He pressed his forehead against the glass, and his shoulders shook with silent sobs. "Dad, I'm so sorry. She had me so controlled. She isolated me. She convinced me that you were the villain." "And when did you decide that was true?" I asked, my voice cutting through his excuses. "At what point did you stop being a victim and become my willing executioner?" He was silent for a long time. It was after I signed the contract," he finally admitted, his voice a whisper. "When I saw the number, my 60%, over $2 million, more money than I'd ever earned on my own. I was going to be free. Free from me. Free from being your son," he suddenly yelled, his face contorting in an anger I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "Free from living in your shadow. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up as the son of Martin Valor? The perfect businessman. The man who did everything right. I could never measure up. I was always Martin Valor's son, never just Arthur." The words hit me like a physical blow. We weren't just talking about the scam. We were unearthing decades of resentment I had been completely blind to. "So you decided to destroy me," I said. "I decided to free myself," he corrected, his voice bitter. "Marissa just showed me how. She made me see that as long as you had power over me, I'd never be my own person. The only way was to eliminate you from the game. And the wedding? I asked. The photo. The humiliation. He lowered his gaze, ashamed. That was me. That was my idea. Marissa wanted something quieter. But I wanted you to feel small. Just for one day, I wanted you to feel the humiliation I felt every single day of my life. His confession shattered the last of my anger. All that was left was a vast, hollow sadness. I looked at the man on the other side of the glass, this 32-year-old stranger who was still my son. Arthur, I said, my voice quiet, I deeply regret that my achievements ever made you feel inadequate. That was never my intention. My work, it was all for you. I know, he whispered, wiping his face. Deep down, I always knew that. But it was easier to blame you than to face my own failures. And now what? I asked. He looked me in the eyes, his own now clear of the anger, filled only with despair. Now I accept what I did. I'm pleading guilty. I'm going to testify against the entire network. I'll return every dollar. And I'll serve my sentence. It's the least I can do. And after prison? I don't know, he admitted. Try to rebuild a life. But I understand. I understand if you can never forgive me. I stared at him. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The man who tried to have me committed. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Arthur, I said slowly. It doesn't mean I trust you, but it means I will not let what you did destroy my capacity to love. His eyes filled with hope. Dad, when you get out, I continued, and if you have truly done the work, if you have truly changed, we can try. We can try to build something new, a new relationship. But it will be on my terms, with boundaries, and trust will be earned, one day at a time, for the rest of your life. Really? He asked. Really, I confirmed. But first, you have to serve your sentence. You have to prove it. I hung up the phone. I stood to leave. Arthur placed his hand on the glass. After a moment's hesitation, I placed mine opposite his. I love you, Dad, he mouthed, tears streaming down his face. I love you too, son, I mouthed back. I left that prison a different man, not cured. But for the first time, I understood how we had gotten here. 2 days later, I was walking. I woke up in my empty house and was crushed by a loneliness so profound, it was a physical ache. Arthur was gone. Eleanor was gone. My life's work felt tainted. I walked for hours, aimlessly, through the historic streets of Cedarwood. I found myself standing in front of St. Lawrence's Chapel, a small parish I'd passed 1,000 times, but never entered. On impulse, I went inside. The interior was modest, quiet, and filled with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. A priest in his 60s was arranging flowers by the altar. He saw me and approached with a kind smile. "Good morning," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Father Aidan. I haven't seen you here before." "Martin Valor," I said. "I was just walking." Father Aidan had that gaze of people who have heard 1,000 confessions. He saw everything. "Would you like to sit, Martin? Sometimes our feet lead us where our hearts need to be." I sat, and without knowing why, I told him everything. The betrayal, the anger, the prison visit, the suffocating loneliness, the feeling that I had failed as a father. He listened without interrupting. "Martin," he said when I finished, his voice gentle but firm, "what you've told me is not the story of a man who failed. It's the story of a man who had the courage to defend his dignity when his entire world tried to tear it down. "But I lost my son," I whispered. "No," Father Aidan corrected me. "Your son lost himself. You simply refused to lose yourself with him." Father Aidan invited me to stay for the midday service. Afterwards, he introduced me to a small group of parishioners having coffee in the parish hall. "This is Martha Jameson," he said, introducing a woman with kind, intelligent eyes who had lost her husband the year before. "And this is Robert Adams, David King." It was a small group. Widowers, divorcees, people whose children lived far away. People who, like me, were navigating the second half of life alone. "I saw your story on the news," Martha said quietly, handing me a cup of coffee. "What a terrible thing to endure." I was shocked. There was no pity in her voice, only empathy. I began to attend these meetings regularly. For the first time, I was in a place where I could speak about my pain without feeling like a victim or a burden. Robert Adams, whose own son had died in an accident, helped me understand. The pain of losing a child, Martin, whether to death or betrayal, it never goes away. But it can be transformed. It can become wisdom that helps others. It was Robert's idea. "Have you ever thought about creating a support group?" he asked me one afternoon. "For parents, people who have been victims of family fraud. With your experience, with all the victims you've been in contact with, you could help people." The idea resonated deep in my bones. With Father Aidan's help, we formally established the St. Lawrence's Support Group for Victims of Family Fraud. We held our first meeting on November 15th. I expected 5 or 6 people. 23 men and women showed up. They came from all over the state. Each one had a story. A daughter who had stolen a pension. A grandson who had stolen an identity. A son-in-law who had secretly sold a house. "The worst part isn't the money," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "It's that I don't know who to trust. If my own blood betrayed me, how can I trust anyone?" At the end of the meeting, we all stood in a circle. "We may have lost the families we were born with," Robert said. "But today, we have found a family of choice." That night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a year. Purpose. 6 months later, my life is unrecognizable. The Saint. Lawrence's support group now has 127 active members, with sister chapters in 2 other cities. We meet every Sunday. We've established a 24-hour crisis hotline. My pain has been transformed into a mission. The legal process concluded last month. The criminal network was dismantled, with 12 of Marissa's accomplices receiving sentences. Marissa Stalder was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. She was ordered to pay restitution of $1.3 million to all her victims. Arthur pleaded guilty. He testified against everyone. For his full cooperation, he received a sentence of 9 years. With good behavior and his testimony, he could be eligible for parole in 6. I have maintained a regular correspondence with Arthur. His letters at first were full of self-pity, but slowly they have changed. He is in therapy in prison. He is studying for an accounting degree. "Dad," he wrote in his last letter, "I finally understand. My resentment towards you was really resentment towards myself. I couldn't meet my own expectations, so it was easier to blame you. You never asked me to be you. I was the one who put that pressure on myself." The letters show growth. They show remorse. Our relationship is slowly being rebuilt, but on new terms. He must complete his sentence. He must maintain stable employment for 2 years after his release. He must continue therapy. Only then will I consider allowing him, gradually, back into my life. It's a hard line. But as Father Aidan says, true love sometimes requires unwavering firmness. This morning, I had breakfast with Martha Jameson. Our friendship, born from shared loss, has slowly, quietly, become something more. It's not the passionate love of my youth with Eleanor. It's something more serene, a conscious companionship. Two people who have seen the worst and are choosing to build something good. My life is full. I volunteer. Richard and I are collaborating on new state legislation to better protect seniors from this exact kind of fraud. I still look at Eleanor's photo on the mantle every day, but I've learned that a heart, when it heals, has an infinite capacity for new kinds of love. The humiliation I felt that day at the church, it seemed like the end of my world. But it wasn't. It was a catalyst. It was a fire that burned my old life to the ground, and in the ashes, I was forced to rebuild. Adrian's betrayal destroyed me, but it also rebuilt me as someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. I've learned that true family is not defined by blood. It is defined by loyalty. It is defined by respect. And it is defined by a love that is earned, protected, and cherished. And in the end, that has been worth every tear. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.